It absolutely quantifies the fact that New York City's public schools are the most segregated schools in America. That being said, there's a lot of things that contribute to the segregated nature of our public schools. That being said, there are some systems and structures that I think have been in place for decades that contribute to that sense of segregation. We know, because this is a community that's very integrated, we know that this community feels a real sense of community. So we know that when students and families are able to access the schools in their community, it builds a sense of community. So we are very, very excited that we have not only started really supporting a bottom-up approach to desegregating our schools, but also a top-down approach. You have to do both. So I'm really proud of the work that's been done already in District 1. Right when I arrived, I had the opportunity then to review and approve a desegregation plan for District 3, which I approved. Recently, you may have heard the mayor and I approved District 15's desegregation plan, which removes screening and barriers at the middle school level. So that's an example. That's an example of a bottom-up. Tough conversations in the community, really, I think, enlightened conversations in the community. But there's also a top-down approach, and that means there are certain things that we can do that we want to do that will remove some more of those barriers as well. One of the things that everybody's heard about is the screen schools. And people ask, well, why are you starting with screen schools? Well, it's not the only place we're talking about, but it's one of the places that we're starting. And I think what's important about that is that if you think about probably some of the most, I would say, status quo in terms of thought, you cannot change because you will destroy those schools, kind of thinking, it's around the specialized schools. Yet we know that across America, there are 165 specialized schools across America. 165. And of the 165 specialized schools in America, there are only eight that use a single test as the sole determinant of who gets to go to those schools. All 8 of those schools are in New York City. So we know that there are things that we could do to not dilute the quality of the schools, to not make it less of what we would call a specialized kind of a school, but that would increase the access to those kinds of schools for students that want those kinds of schools. So we propose to change that. And obviously there's a lot of conversation that's going to happen around that proposal. We know that some folks are very passionate about not changing that proposal, but I have to tell you that as an educator, there is no reliable or valid justification for that single test. And when you think about it, we ask our students at the middle school level to go to school every day. We ask students at the middle school level to do your best in school. So do well in your English class, your math class, your social studies, your science class. We ask you to attend and not be truant. But in reality, none of that matters. At the middle school, for a student that wants to go to specialized school, technically it doesn't really matter if you do well in any of those classes. It doesn't matter if you do well in your state assessments and you're in the 4th quartile, because all that really matters is that you take one test on one Saturday for one amount of time, and if you score above a certain percentage, and by the way, that test's not even aligned to state standards, you get to go to a specialized school. So I think we're giving contrary messages. That's just one example of a top-down thing that we can do. I will share also that there are, aside from District 1, 3, and 15, there are also now 8 other community districts in New York City that are actively now planning their engagement process for integrating their schools as well. So this is a movement that's gaining lots of traction, and we want to be helpful, we want to be supportive of that movement as we go forward. But I will tell you one thing that's absolutely true. The CECs in every one of our community school districts are playing an integral part in those conversations. We want to be supportive of that. And probably the group that is probably the most unheralded group, but is one of the most powerful groups in terms of this momentum that is building, are our students. Everywhere I go, from Staten Island to Queens to the Bronx to Brooklyn to Manhattan, it's the student groups that are coming forward and saying, we want our schools to be integrated.